Hello everyone, welcome to the Straits Times Education Forum on Reimagining Universities post-COVID, which is being held in partnership with the Singapore Management University. I'm Lydia Lim and I'm the moderator for this forum. I'm the head of SPH Schools and we produce content for students. I'd like to first extend a very warm welcome to many of you joining us live on Zoom, including those overseas from SMU's partner universities, Australian National University, Osaka University, Shanghai University of Finance and Economics, Trinity College Dublin, and Technologico de Monterrey in Mexico. I'm excited to be joined by our three panelists. They are experts on the subject of higher education, each in their own way. So let me introduce them in turn, starting with the man in the middle, who's Mr. Lawrence Wong, Singapore's Education Minister. In 2011, he led a major review of Singapore's university system. And he's also been playing a key role in Singapore's fight against COVID-19 as co-chair of the Multi-Ministry Task Force. And to his left, we have Professor Lily Kong. She is president of the Singapore Management University. She has held leadership roles in various universities here, and she's also an award-winning teacher and researcher. The third panelist is my colleague, Sandra Davie. She's the Straits Times Senior Education Correspondent. She's been writing on education since 1998, and before that, she was an investigative journalist. So, let me give you an idea of what to expect in the next 1 hour and 15 minutes. First, we'll start with each of the panelists making their opening remarks on the theme of reimagining universities, and then we will take questions from you. Now, if you have questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A button on your Zoom screen to submit the questions, and we'll go through them and field some of them to the panelists later on. And now, to get us going, let me invite Minister to make his opening remarks.
Thanks very much, Lydia. Good morning, everyone. Very good to be here to join all of you for this ST Education Forum. I think in a typical year, we would have been gathered face-to-face in a large auditorium and we would have been able to see one another. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, we are unable to do so, but I think the silver lining behind all this is in some ways, we are able to reach out to a larger audience through this virtual format. COVID-19 has truly prompted a rethink in many aspects of our lives. Not too long ago, I attended an IPS forum where the theme was reset. Today, we are looking at reset or reimagination in a specific sector, the university sector. In fact, for years, even before COVID-19, there have been predictions that the university sector would be completely disrupted by technology. And you see this particularly in countries like America and the UK, because tuition fees have been rising, costs have escalated, universities become more bloated, the student debts rise, and so there have been questions about the value of university education. And the pandemic has prompted even more questioning of these trends, right? Because students are unable to attend classes face-to-face. And so there is further prompting of whether universities need to do more to reform themselves. In fact, there are now predictions in some of these countries that there will be so much disruption that some universities may have to close, and we may well see the demise of more universities because they are unable to cope with the pressures. We are not immune to these trends and pressures in Singapore, but our approach has been not to allow external forces to disrupt us, but to proactively disrupt ourselves instead. And so over the years, we have continually reviewed and updated our university sector. And that's how we have been able to grow a strong and diverse university sector in Singapore today. And I say that not just because I'm the Minister for Education and complementing our own universities, but we have independent external validators coming around. They look at our universities and they will affirm that what we are doing in terms of research and teaching and learning are comparable to the best universities in the world. the fact that we have been able to do that in such a short time, I think credit goes out to the people we have in our universities, our university presidents, academic faculty, and staff. So we really should recognize their many contributions. Still, I think we should not rest on our laurels. We should recognize that it's a continual work in progress, that we must keep on improving and doing better. And COVID-19 will accelerate many of the trends and driving forces we face in the university sector. So today I'll share 3 areas where I think the universities of the future can do better in within the Singapore context. First, I would say we ought to do better in terms of, or we want to continuously do better in terms of teaching and learning. We want to have better teaching and learning outcomes for all our university students. Again, this is not a new criticism. Since the start of the modern university, there have been criticisms about how universities prioritize research over teaching and how academic faculty care more about research than teaching. It's not always a fair criticism because, in my experience, some of the best researchers are also excellent and most inspiring teachers. But this criticism exists, and we are aware of it. There are also criticisms that the university curriculum has not changed much. I read a recent commentary in the UK newspaper, and it said, the university course has barely changed its 3-year structure of lectures, essays, and exams in 100 years. I think it's a bit exaggerated. I mean, this is a UK commentator. But again, in Singapore, we've continually been looking at ways to refresh and update the quality of teaching and learning in our universities. So the university course in Singapore today is quite different from what it was not 100 years ago, even 10 years ago or 5 years ago. It's not just lectures anymore. You have a whole range of different types of programs. You've got seminars, you've got collaborative projects, overseas opportunities, service-based learning, internships, capstone projects. It's quite a rich and diverse range of offerings. And more recently, all our universities are looking at ways to provide more holistic learning. In other words, we are trying to broaden the range of offerings for a student. It's not just focusing on the specific domain knowledge that you would like to pursue your major in, but we are also looking at greater breadth, more interdisciplinary and cross-domain knowledge. For example, in areas like digital literacy, innovation, entrepreneurship, communication, soft skills, these are all very important and relevant. We have also continually been looking at updating the method of instruction in our universities. Even before COVID, universities here in Singapore have been moving away from large lecture formats and making use of more interactive formats to engage their students. And again, this trend will accelerate with COVID-19. I don't think we will see everything going online because learning is still very much a relational activity and human contact is essential. But increasingly, we will see a combination of online and classroom, or what we call blended learning, or even flipped classrooms, and that's likely to become the new norm. So continually looking at ways to improve the outcomes for student education, I think that's a key priority, and we will want to continue to do better in that area. The second area is in embracing lifelong learning. The model of university education everywhere for a long time has been about front-loading education when someone is young. So you have a fixed period of education, and then after that, a fixed period of work. I think that model is no longer relevant today. We need to have a rotational model of learning where work and education are rotated over the course of your career. What does this mean for the university? Well, two things. One, you need to cater for multiple entry points along the age distribution rather than focusing on full-time education for the young. That means looking at offering part-time degrees for working adults, modular offerings that can be taken throughout one's life and which can be stacked towards a qualification later on. Second, universities must cater for multiple entry points along the entire skills spectrum and not just focus on the cognitive. So they have to think about technical hands-on skills, industry-relevant skills, practical life skills, even social skills like relationship building, working in teams, negotiation. These are all very important. So the university of the future needs to be plural rather than singular. It should be more of a multiversity rather than a university. And I think we can start to see some of these changes across all our universities. I was in MOE 10 years ago, and when I reflected on the universities today, when I see all our universities and visit them, I see so much more focus on executive lifelong learning compared to, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. A much richer offering of programs, catering not just to students in the full-time program, but for everyone in the workforce. So universities embracing lifelong learning is the second area which I think we should aim for. Thirdly and finally, we need much closer collaboration with industry. Now, it's become a truism to say that universities have to work closely with industry. All universities say that. But still, we must continue to do much more in this area. And when universities don't move fast enough, then they become at risk of being disrupted. And again, you see this around the world. When, for example, large companies now decide to set up their own academies, partly out of frustration that the universities in their countries are unable to produce graduates to meet their needs. Right? One example is Dyson. They set up Dyson Institute because of their difficulties in getting engineering graduates in the UK. So they had their own institute to meet this engineering skills gap. At the start, Dyson Institute offered degrees in partnership with the University of Warwick. Now it's been granted its own degree awarding powers. So it doesn't need a university anymore. It's become a university in its own right. I don't think we need to get there in Singapore, but our universities should therefore strengthen and deepen their collaboration with companies here in Singapore when it comes to student education. And there's a lot that our universities are already doing. They are getting industry inputs on curriculum. Our polytechnics do very well in this regard, and the universities increasingly will also have to take a leaf from the polytechnic sector in getting industry inputs to shape curriculum. They are getting students involved in solving real-world industry challenges, and we are creating new pathways in our universities like work-study programs, which goes beyond internship, because then in a work-study program, the university and the company are really partners in creating the curriculum for the student. Such collaboration is also crucial in the area of research. So it's not just in education, but even for research, collaboration is important. And we have in Singapore increased significantly our investments in R&D. Some part of this R&D work is in basic research because universities must continue to push the frontiers of knowledge and discovery. But a lot of it is also has to be part of the broader ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship and enterprise within Singapore itself. And that's why we've been encouraging more corporate labs, corporate laboratories to be set up within our university sector, where the professors in the university can work with the engineers or the people within the companies themselves, and they can start to translate cutting-edge research into innovative, groundbreaking commercial solutions. And in our fight against COVID-19, for example, we have also seen how such university academic industry collaboration has been most useful, for example, in developing test kits and other solutions to fight the virus. So in conclusion, I hope to see universities of the future becoming centers of learning, nurturing a broad range of skills, having close collaboration with the industry, and nurturing everyone to be a lifelong learner. I believe our universities do play critical roles in contributing to the well-being of our nation and our people. And as our universities continue to rebuild and reimagine themselves, they will play a very important role in shaping the future of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Well, I mean, you've got me so excited. I think, maybe I should go back to school and continue my learning. And it's also very interesting what you said about, how our university and education system has actually sought to disrupt itself, which I think increasingly we see that is a very important and yet a very difficult thing to do. And in contrast to some countries where change has been very slow and maybe too gradual, maybe we have a different challenge because in fact we've been changing so much and sometimes so quickly that I think maybe sometimes parents or even employers have a hard time keeping up with the changes in education system. So it's an interesting contrast that we have here. And so let me move things along, and I will invite Prof. Kong now to make her remarks.
Thank you, Lydia, and thank you, Minister. A very good morning to everyone, and I'm delighted to be here this morning. It's a shame that we can't meet in SMU, which has typically been the practice in the last couple of years for ST Education Forum, and this is a collaboration between SPH and SMU, so we look forward to the future where we might be able to invite all of you back to our campus. There is no question that COVID-19 has really disrupted our lives in many ways. How we work, how we live, how we learn has changed. I remember reading a Washington Post article where readers were asked what were the words that came to their mind when they thought about COVID-19, and words like lost and chaotic and you're on mute emerged. And I dare say that, some of those words would be familiar to us. I don't think we've been chaotic necessarily, but I understand that many of us have sometimes felt a little bit lost, and definitely we have to remind our colleagues and our friends that they're on mute. Now, the discussions about viruses and vaccines will continue, and governments and institutions and individuals will continue to find ways of grappling with coming back to normal life. But the question is, what is normal? And how do we really sort of prepare ourselves for what is actually a new normal? This speaks to the theme of today's forum, which is about reimagining universities post-COVID. And there is no question that the classrooms have been disrupted, much as the workplace has been disrupted. And there's a lot of talk about how technology is going to disrupt education moving ahead. Because we can't be in the classroom, we're going to rely on technology. And so technology, accelerated by COVID, is thought to be a key force in disrupting education moving ahead. But really, that's not a new topic if you think about it. In many years ago, this has been a topic, but let me just pick on one example. In 2008, a group of Harvard professors wrote a book called Disrupting Class. And they predicted that by 2019, about half of all middle and high school courses would be delivered online by 2019. This was, of course, in their context. And we all know that that hasn't happened. Some people believe that it will still happen, aided by COVID, but the jury is out. You might also be interested in a more recent book in 2020, which is published by Harvard University Press by an author called Justin Reich, and it's called Failure to Disrupt: Why Technology Alone Can't Transform Education. And these are going to help focus my remarks. These books and these predictions are going to help focus my remarks in the next several minutes about, our fixation on technology and how it's going to disrupt education, accelerated by COVID. I actually think that that is not the most important question. The much more important question, to my mind, is what are the outcomes of higher education that we hope to see, and what's the best way of delivering those outcomes? And for me, if technology is a part of it, great, let's go for it. But if there are certain sorts of learning experiences that are not best delivered via technology, but circumstances don't allow us to carry out those learning experiences in the way that we prefer, then we use technology to make the best of the situation, and we deliver the best experiences that we can until such time that we can pivot offline. And so I would really like us to take a very commonsensical view and not get caught up in technology for its own sake. So the more important question for me is, what are the learning outcomes that we desire? And I'm going to speak about 3 areas, paralleling something of what the minister has talked about. Now, first, there is no question that, whatever it is you choose to study, you've got to be well equipped with sufficient knowledge and information about that subject area. So there is no getting away from some level of content, right? But content changes over time rapidly. Content can be gotten online. And actually, this is the area, I think, where technology can really make a difference. You can put material on videos, on podcasts, you can learn at your own pace, and arguably be more effective, because we all learn at different paces, we all learn in different ways, and you can pause, you can replay, you can go back and listen again. So arguably, this is an area where technology can be effective. But truly, as you've already heard the minister say, learning outcomes go well beyond content, information, and knowledge. All that is just the tip of the iceberg. We want students to be able to think critically, to be able to develop ideas creatively, to bring new perspectives to bear on issues and challenges, to solve problems. And this, in my view, is best done through discussion, through debate, through working on real-world projects, and often working together in groups, because you bring together different perspectives to bear on a particular challenge or project. So when circumstances allow, I believe that this is best done in person. We know that when we're in group discussions and working on projects, the interactions are fluid and multiple, and we're interjecting, and we're showing our different documents at the same time. We're doodling, sketching, mapping. And can we do online discussions? We can. But what can we do? We can show one document at a time on the screen. And when you show the document on the screen, all your group mates are shunted to a sidebar, and you might even fall off the screen, and you don't even see your group mates when you're looking at the document. You certainly can't be sketching and pushing your papers to one another. But, can we hold discussions online? Yes, we can. Will we be able to achieve certain outcomes? Yes, we will. Will it be optimal? I don't think we necessarily will be as effective, but we will learn different skills. And you, working on a project online, will learn to adapt and have different skill sets from what you learn when you're working in a group. So for me, it's a commonsensical approach. When the circumstances allow, let's come together, right? And let's not say, I'm comfortable at home, I don't want to get out of the house, I don't want to get out of my couch. When circumstances allow, come out. Engage in the discussions, face to face. When circumstances don't allow, use technology and use it to the best that we can. And make the best of it, and we will learn different kinds of lessons. Next, by way of learning outcomes, we also want our students to be able to navigate different cultures, to see things from different perspectives, to learn to be independent, to be resourceful, to be resilient, and to be empathetic. And under normal circumstances, this means that we send our students out into the community. We send our students out to different parts of the world for exchange programs, community projects, internships, and so forth. And I remember when I was a student for the first time living overseas by myself, the prospect of not having affordable housing loom very large, makes you grow up very quickly. That cannot be replicated online. But when circumstances allow, let's take advantage of those opportunities. But there will be times, like now, when the circumstances don't allow. And even when things get better, you will get another virus, another pandemic, right? So we need to learn to pivot in and out. And when circumstances don't allow, do we capitulate and fold over and say, forget about these other dimensions? We can't do the internships, we can't go overseas. That's a terrible thing. Education has gotten worse. No, we don't fold over. We don't capitulate. We use technology again, and we find ways of providing those kinds of experiences, albeit differently. So what do we do at SMU? We have virtual exchange programs, and some of our partner institutions are online. Thank you for joining us from different parts of the world. We have collaborative courses that are co-developed with other universities. We have something coming up with the University of Southern California, we have something coming up with the University of California, Irvine, where the professors are working together to co-create the courses and co-deliver the courses. And you're in the same virtual classroom with other students. Is it the same as actually going to California? Of course it's not. But will you still gain something from it? You will. Likewise with internships. If at some point in your life you're going to end up working from home because the circumstances dictate that you do so, well, maybe that kind of virtual internship now is going to help you prepare for that. So there's always something you can learn from different circumstances. So you will surmise from my comments now that learning for me is not just what goes on in a classroom and extends well beyond. Some dimensions can pivot online and be very effective and maybe even more effective. But some dimensions can pivot online, maybe not the same, but you will learn different things. Different experiences will be garnered nonetheless. So let's optimize the learning experience for the moment. Whatever that moment is, let's optimize the learning experience by combining the physical classroom, the virtual classroom, and when circumstances allow, embrace the community, the workplace, the world as part of that learning environment in a balanced way. So we talk about reimagining universities, and I want to remind myself and all of us that we reimagine universities for a purpose, to deliver the best learning outcomes that we can under whatever circumstances we find ourselves in. And I think for that, Singapore universities, I think we've done quite well, and I hope that our students are taking the opportunity to learn different kinds of lessons. I don't want to say too much more except for lifelong learning and working with industry, which the ministry spoke about. And just yesterday, my colleagues and I were reflecting to ourselves that we now have about 10,000 undergraduates matriculated at SMU. And this is a long, long way from the early days, 21 years ago, when we had a few hundred, 340 some to be precise. We have about 2,000 postgraduate students doing the master's and PhD. But guess what? We have over 20,000 individuals taking courses with us, either through our SMU Academy or executive education. That is the pivot that the minister is talking about. And we would very much like to be able to continue this journey to provide lifelong education for everyone. And I always joke that you enter SMU at 18 and you don't leave us till you're 80. Working with industry is something that we pay a lot of attention to, and I can assure the minister that for all our curriculum, we make sure that we consult with industry before we actually roll them out. And for those who are with us, the work-study arrangements are now very much a part of what we do. We have programs that are co-developed with Google Singapore, for example, in data analytics, and co-delivered by Google practitioners, and with internships with Google partners. We have a work-study arrangement with SingHealth in health economics and management, co-created with the senior leaders in SingHealth, so that, you know, even though we're not producing doctors and nurses as some of the other universities do, we produce those who can run hospitals, right? And there is learning through the work-study program. We have SMU X courses where you do projects for business and government and society, public sector, private sector, people sector. And you learn through those projects by working with multidisciplinary groups, with an industry mentor, with a faculty mentor. And these are ways in which you prepare yourself for the world of work. And we're very gratified that year on year, our graduate employment outcomes are strong, and we intend to continue on this journey. So thank you for this opportunity of working with Straits Times. Thank you, Minister, for joining us on this occasion. And thank you to the participants. I look forward to a frank and fruitful discussion.
Thanks very much, Prof. Kong. I love the point you made about how we all need to learn to pivot in and out as the circumstances require. Yeah. So finally, Sandra, please share with us your thoughts.
Thank you, Lydia. Actually, a lot of the points I want to bring up has been touched by the Minister and Prof. Kong. Thank you for joining us here for this forum, and SMU for the wonderful partnership we've had over all these years. Just would like to add on to some of the points that they've already brought up. As the Minister and Prof. Kong said, blended learning, hybrid models of delivering university education, accrediting and recognizing non-traditional modes of learning. I've heard all this before. I've written about it. I've interviewed the ministers and university presidents about this. So it's nothing new, really. But what the pandemic has done is really forced universities to go online, right, and try out these different modes, different models, adapt, adjust, look at the limitations as well as the advantages to be accrued from doing it differently. SMU, for example, did its admissions online. We were forced to do that. But in the process of doing that, they realized that they are dealing with Generation Z who are very comfortable online. And perhaps during interviews, they're actually better at interacting with a panel of interviewers. So, so it made their admission officers think, should we do more of this online? So there are advantages to be accrued, as the other speakers have pointed out. So just like working from home, the current forced experiment of having to deliver a university education online has significantly lowered the psychological barriers. I think not just for students and parents, but also faculty. I know faculty who were very reluctant initially, but who got really good at it, and I've actually gone online to listen into some of their lectures, and it's very engaging, and you sort of think, hey, this can be done online, and done quite well. But as the Minister pointed out, the switch to online learning has also made us reconsider the sticker price on university education, the tuition fees that we pay, as well as the value proposition of higher education. So for quite a while now, we've been discussing this, and questions have been raised on whether the traditional 4-year, rather expensive route of degree education is the right model for our times and our economy currently. So, or would a more shorter courses, more nimble, just-in-time learning kind of courses, would that be more suitable for our digital economy, where continuous upskilling is required to keep pace with technological advances and also the shrinking shelf life of skills, right? So since I had the fortune to interview Professor Scott Galloway, NYU Stern Business School professor, I thought I'll present some of his ideas, not necessarily because I agree with his predictions, but I think it's food for thought on the changes that this pandemic has wrought. Professor Galloway has written a book called Post-Corona, Crisis and Opportunities, and his most notable prediction on higher education is that the pandemic has paved the way for big tech's entry into higher education. He sees the likes of Apple and Google joining forces with elite universities and providing these courses online and in a hybrid model. They're not talking about fully online courses either. So think Stanford and MIT at Google, for example. Why does he think this will happen? He says big tech needs new revenue streams. So they have to look at new industries that they can disrupt, right? But in the US at least, this may not be a bad thing, because as he points out in his book, tuition fees alone have gone up 1,400% over 40 years, right? And so massifying higher education through online delivery will bring costs down considerably and enable more students to access some of the best university education that the US has to offer. Okay, by now I'm sure some of you are wondering, okay, so this may happen in the US. How is this going to affect me here in Singapore? Are you saying that this is likely to happen in Singapore? Well, I think, and we don't have these issues of rising tuition fees and student debt, not to the extent that you see in the US. But let me just give you an example. Just think of a hybrid course, degree course offered by Stanford or MIT. And they say it'll be fully accredited by the university. You study online and offline in campus, say for one term a year or in the final year, 1 out of the 4 years, right? And they team up with a big tech giant who are known for their skills training, all right? Google and Apple and the likes of it. Wouldn't that be an attractive option for young people like yourselves who are looking at going to university? So it is likely to disrupt university education. And of course, the US has some of the best universities and the big tech companies. So if they do come up with more effective ways of delivering university education that provides value as well, then I do think that eventually it will make its way here in Singapore as well. One last point, but most important, Minister Wong has spoken about this in previous speeches, and I've written about it as well. The pandemic has laid bare the divides and inequities in society. It has hit families in the lower socioeconomic bracket most of all. I bring this up because I already have had some parents express their worries and concerns about sending their children to polytechnic and university. Now, I have full information to give them on the bursaries and the various forms of financial help that the universities and MOE provides. But then again, it's not just a matter of paying the fees, but some of the families actually need their older children who are of age to go out to work, to help support the family, because the parents' incomes or jobs have been hit in this pandemic. So I think education, universities should continue to look at how to enable social mobility. I recently tried to look at information on what proportion of students in our universities were the first in their families, in their extended families, to go to university. That's a very important indicator of whether universities are enabling social mobility. Unfortunately, this is something that we do not track yet. I hope we do, because once you have one person in the family making it to university, the benefits are tremendous for the others that follow. So, over the years, we've done much in creating multiple pathways, giving second, third chances to students to build up their potential. And I think we need to double down on these efforts. Overall, I'm optimistic. The longer-term effect will be a revitalizing of university education through new thinking and technologies.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, all of you. And now it's time for your questions. And please remember that you can still submit the questions on Zoom. But first, because we asked members of the public to submit questions ahead of today, and we actually received some 50 questions. So I'm going to ask Minister, because we received questions on the cost of university education, I'm going to ask Minister to respond to some of the points that Sandra just made about, how the pandemic has actually hurt some families very badly. And also people are asking, hey, with more teaching moving online, how is that going to affect fees and costs, etc.? Yeah.
Well, thanks Lydia and Sandra for the comments on affordability. Keeping university fees affordable has always been and will continue to be a key priority for us in the ministry and also for all our universities. How do we do so? First, we keep a very close watch on cost. Our universities are autonomous, but Lily can attest to the fact that the ministry watches over cost like a hawk as well, and makes sure that we do not end up with bloated universities. So that's one key imperative, right? We make sure that costs are contained. There is a view that, well, so much of this is going online. Surely it can be cheaper, and you can reduce costs because so much of it is online. But I would put to everyone, yes, if everything is 100% online, sure. But that's not a university education. You're not going to get a university education by going online and signing up to MOOCs and doing it for 4 years. So it will be hybrid, it will be blended, which means that faculty will still be required. And a large part of the cost in all universities, not just in Singapore, are manpower costs. Costs to pay the faculty, the staff, to keep things going and to provide a good learning experience for students. So we will watch over costs. Online can, I think, enhance the learning experience through blended models, but it's not necessarily a way to bring costs down. Number two, we continue to ensure generous subsidies for university education in Singapore, and that's how we prevent mounting student debt problems that you see everywhere else in the world. So we are committed to provide subsidies for university education for Singaporeans, and we will continue to ensure that the subsidy levels remain. Thirdly, beyond the subsidies, we have a whole range of bursaries which we have recently enhanced. And we have done it for not just for the lower income, but the bursaries go up to the middle income. And I think that's the right approach because it ensures a progressive system. Those who are well off, well, you can pay the fees after subsidies. But the families who have difficulties, the lower income, even up to the middle income, then generous bursaries are provided by the government, and the universities themselves have their own sponsors and donors to help support these children as well. Then finally, I think the point that Sandra raised was, fees may be affordable, but some parents may want their students to work first and forego studying because there is an opportunity cost. And they say, I need you to generate incomes. It may be so, but I think that we'll have to look at this in different ways. We can, for example, help the families through other means, not necessarily through the Ministry of Education and the university, but through other social assistance to help the family. The student might consider doing work-study programs where they can work and study at the same time. And finally, if the student decides, well, I really want to work first, for example, that's okay, but then also don't think of work as a way, working as necessarily a path that then forgoes all studying anyway, because again, our model tends to be everything needs to be front-loaded. But if you're looking at a continuum, lifelong education after polytechnic, you may well decide to work first. But it doesn't mean that you're foregoing your chance to get a degree. You can do so later in life as well.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Yeah, so I think I guess there's so many options. Sometimes I guess one of the most important things is for people to explore the options and try to find out the different ways that they can go about navigating this situation. But can I get Prof. Kong to also respond on this issue, concern about costs?
Yes, so fully understand, and as Minister has said, we work very hard to ensure that all those who deserve a place in university and want to come in, but for financial resources can't, we make sure that we have the support systems for them. So we've set up something, for example, called SMU Access, and as long as you meet certain per capita income criteria, etc., we make sure that all your fees are paid for all 4 years. Having said that, as Minister says, actually it's not always a bad thing to say, oh well, I have to go to work now rather than go to university, because actually you might come back to university in 2, 3, 4 years' time more ready for that education. You've taken some things from your experience in the workplace that can actually enrich your learning and actually also enrich the learning of your peers. So there is something to be said about, if you had to, don't see that as the end of the road as such. It's actually something that could be positive. At the same time, if you were starting to work and you weren't going to take a degree, well, there's nothing to stop you from taking, say, a short skills course or 2, which is going to be much more affordable, which is going to prepare you for the workplace, and you can then, learn from the workplace. And where universities need to change, coming back to what Sandra was saying, was that we need to learn to recognize work experience appropriately, so that, if you didn't have the academic results or the academic grades, that work experience can be translated into a suitable admission criteria as such. So in the same way that I think universities can change and respond to the situations, I would encourage parents and students not to think of it as, oh, it's the end of the road, I'm going to have to send my child off to work rather than to university.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'd like to move the discussion along to another question we received, which is about admission criteria. So one particular one was from a a polytechnic student who still believes the system is stacked against him. And could I get your comments on how you see admission criteria changing, and actually how do students and parents also need to change the way we think about admissions?
Well,
Minister.
I think I can understand polytechnic students all aspiring to want to get to a university after their polytechnic education. We are creating more places in the universities for Singaporeans, particularly for polytechnic upgraders. And that's why we set up our 5th and 6th applied universities, SIT and SUSS. We have also been changing the basis for university admissions. We have moved towards aptitude-based admissions, so that we do not, the universities rely less on academic grades and can look more at the students' aptitudes and strengths for that particular course, as Prof. Kong was saying just now. So all of this should give more opportunities for polytechnic students to get a place in the university. But I would say 2 other points to that. Number one, as Prof. Kong said just now, there may well be polytechnic students for one reason or another who might say, well, I don't necessarily need to rush to get into a university right away. I might want to work first. And I think there we do want to ensure that polytechnic graduates are valued by the industry in their own right and will be able to command good pay, good careers. And that's why I've asked our second minister, Minister Dr. Maliki, to do a review of our polytechnic education and ITE pathways, so that we can look at how polytechnic education itself can be enhanced, and poly graduates going into the industry will be valued and will command good jobs and good career progression without necessarily having to go for degrees. The Germans do this very well with a dual track program, right? Half of their student cohorts go to university, another half would go for applied education, vocational training, and not all of them would go to university, but they are in demand, they are held in high regard. So that's work that's underway. And thirdly, as we have said just now, even if a poly graduate were to go straight away to work, that does not foreclose the opportunity later on to upgrade, get a degree, part-time degree through modules which can be stacked up to a degree later on in life. Many possibilities remain open.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Minister. Prof. Kong, would you like...
So I want to give our polytechnic friends every assurance that we take the applications very seriously. And we welcome having Polytechnic students together with A-level students, together with IB students, because you all bring different experiences to bear, and that actually enriches the classroom. We've done our own studies, and we actually believe that it is the interaction of the different backgrounds that makes for a richer classroom, and the learning experience is therefore enhanced. So we look very seriously at Polytechnic applications as well as A-level and IB applications and international qualifications. Now, what do we look for? We don't just look at the grades. That's one data point, but from the very beginning in the year 2000 when SMU was established, we insisted on meeting every student who's eventually admitted. So whether it's an individual interview, a group interview, an engagement session, we meet with every single one. And we have turned away some students with quite good A-level grades because some of the other dimensions that we're looking for were not quite there. And we have admitted Polytechnic students, and we still do, because you demonstrate the aptitude, attitude, intellectual curiosity, you have an ability to communicate, by which I don't mean Queen's English, right? That you're able to get your ideas across, that there's something there that we can work with and transform, provide a transformative educational experience. So I would say actually that over the years, there's been an increase in the number of Polytechnic students who apply and who are admitted. So please don't be discouraged.
Thanks, Prof. Kong.
I
Sandra, please
have
weigh in
some
on this.
figures because I've been covering education, and one of the things that I do track is Polytechnics graduates progressing on to university, because that's an important consideration for a lot of them. I think when Min Wong headed then the review of the university sector, and when the government announced that they're going to increase the cohort participation rate to 40% by 2020, then only about 20% of the Polytechnic cohort got places in the local universities. Now we are at 30%. But I think what's significant is aptitude-based admissions. I mean, SMU has been practicing this more holistic way of admitting students since the start. But aptitude-based admissions, especially for NUS, NTU, which have the larger intakes, and many courses, including medicine, law, and so on. You see a lot more Polytechnic students making it to these very competitive degree courses, and it's because the universities are looking beyond grades, looking at their ability to work with people, teamwork skills, communication skills, leadership skills. All these are being taken into consideration, and it's really been good for Polytechnic students. I mean, you see them everywhere in every faculty now, even the arts and social sciences. And they do well because they bring with them certain skills. Having had that 3 years in the Polytechnic, they're more practical. They tend to roll up their sleeves to get the work done. So there are some advantages to be reaped from Polytechnic education that serves them well when they go on to university.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I would just like to invite the audience to send in your questions on Zoom if you have any before the time runs out, okay? And now I'd like to ask another question which we received. Okay, this question is from someone who seems to think that there's going to be a gap opening up between employers who went to school and I guess started work in a pre-COVID world, and the students and graduates who are going to be trained in a post-COVID world in terms of expectations, for example. I mean, first of all, I want to ask you whether you think there might be such a gap. What might that gap look like? And because this member of the public wants to know that if there is such a gap, what is the ministry or universities take on what might you do to address it?
I'm not sure what the concern is. Is the concern that perhaps a student going through education during this period might face more disruptions, might not get the full benefit of face-to-face learning, and therefore may not be valued so much? Or is there a different...
Not sure. I mean, my own response to this was that actually there are always gaps between people who go to school at in different eras.
So I think if the concern is about this particular time, that not getting the full benefit of all the interactions, I would say, let's, number one, this is not permanent. It's not going to be permanent. At some point, the pandemic will pass. We will have vaccines for everyone by the third quarter of this year. So we will be in a much better position to cope, to bring back more activities, to allow students to go overseas for all the programs that they typically do. So it's temporal. We can tide through this. And as Prof. Kong said just now, make full use of the circumstances. Well, yes, temporarily there are some concerns, but we can, find opportunities even in these times of adversity by connecting virtually, by treating this as teachable and learning moments. After all, if later on in life you will have to deal with future pandemics, then this experience gives you some chance to become more resilient, more adaptable, and to learn new skills after all. So I wouldn't put too much weight on these temporary disruptions. Our focus has to be, if there is any gap, then the next generation, the next cohort will be continuously better than the previous ones, and so on and so forth. And also that each cohort not just being better, but recognizing that learning is for life, and you continue to improve themselves.
Yeah, I think the question reflects a lot of uncertainty about when the pandemic is going to end. So thanks for making that point. And
I think,
Sandra, please.
I think
jump in.
Perhaps what the person who posed the question meant to ask was going on non-traditional modes of learning. For example, you talked about not front-loading your education. What if the students were to take a gap year in between to go and do something else and then come back to do their degree, which, SMU is open to it. But then how will the employer view that?
Okay.
They will look at your CV and wonder, what happened in between, How come you went off and did something else? Maybe even travel, but there's value in that as well, right? Because they have grown up in a very traditional mode of education, and they see the value in it. They may not understand this more non-traditional, something that's disrupted, going back and forth between...
I mean, some young people say that their parents and grandparents don't understand why they want to take a gap year. It's like wasting your time.
Exactly.
It reminds me of when I came back from studies and the PSC asked me, why did you take music for your university classes?
Wasting his time.
But I think mindsets have changed, and will continue to change. So hopefully, at the end of the day, the employers looking at the students, the graduates, will not just look at. Will look at the student for who they are and what they actually, the value and the value proposition that they bring to the workplace. And that will be the ultimate test, not based on the qualifications, the credential, or whether you had
hiring based on skills.
This experience or that experience which somehow feels different from what I had gone through. Of course it will be different. But look at the value that the student brings, the graduate brings to the workplace, the skills, the competencies, and the contributions. And we hope with all that we are doing, all that the universities are doing, each batch of graduates will be able to bring more value, more contributions to the workplace and to employers.
Yeah, well, I guess, speaking as, from the perspective of a young person, I guess you are actually confronted with a whole spectrum of employers, right? Some are more enlightened than others. So you do not know who you're going to encounter at the other end of a desk, of a job interview, right? So perhaps this question comes from that. But Prof. Kong, what's your experience about,
So I
differences.
agree with you, Lydia, that
Yeah.
you know every generation will look at the next generation and say, oh, they're different, and in a sense, maybe not as good. You know, there's always that sense. But you know, really, I mean, each generation brings something different and something positive. So the younger generation is going to bring a whole lot of technological skills that the older generation doesn't have, for example, right? And actually, I have heard so often. You know, senior people in companies and firms saying, oh, well, your new graduates are teaching me this or that that I didn't know. So I think, but of course, you know, the senior employers and employees have the experience that younger ones don't have. So, you know, it's really about learning from one another and optimizing the skill sets within a company as such. I do want to say that you know, whatever the situation is, and I hark back to my remarks earlier, my opening remarks, that whatever the situation is, if we see it as a moment where we learn something from it, you will always bring something positive to your next destination, whether it's a new workplace or a new course of study or whatever, right? And rather than kind of fold over and say, oh, these are terrible times, I'm not getting the best, etc. And I think that would be a defeatist attitude.
Thank you. Sandra, what's your sense of employers? I mean, are they changing?
I think they are. The technology companies, of course, lead the way because they look for people with the skills required to do the job at hand. I think employers are changing, but perhaps it's not been so visible, and they haven't talked enough about the kind of skills they are looking for as opposed to qualifications. So there still needs to be that still needs to be a lot more visible and talked about, I feel, and publicized. Yeah.
You know, I think our students have figured it out. So I'd say that on average, an SMU student does 2.6 internships before they graduate. And they do at least one, and some students do multiple SMUX courses. And I speak to them and I say, why are you doing this? Why don't you take your vacation and go and holiday or whatever, right? Rather than packing it so tightly. And they tell me that it's actually a way for them to figure out different employers and whether the fit is there, right? Different industries, different, even if it's the same industry, different companies, different cultures, and to look for that fit. So even if it's an SMUX project and they are working with a particular company, SME, MNC, whatever it is, they get to know what that company is like, whether what they bring is going to be valued, what they can learn from it, and simultaneously the company gets to know them. Internships, the same. So as you say, there are different types of employers looking for different things. Some may be more enlightened, some less so, and the students figure it out.
Okay. Great to
And
know.
the employers that decide not to change end up losing out.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
Exactly.
So I've been told to speed up the taking of questions. We had actually received one question from Ellie Stewart on vocational education, saying that he thought that there was still a stigma against it. And now we have a question from Andronicus Tang. In the age of rapid digitalization, there's much emphasis on areas like AI, machine learning, robotics, data analytics, digital marketing, etc. Arts and humanities seem to be playing second fiddle. What's your opinion on that? Very often they are relegated to secondary role. This phrase soft skills seems to imply that.
No. Well, there's no doubt that we are living in a digital age. So digital literacy will be important. But it doesn't mean that everybody needs to go out and learn coding.
Yeah.
Or that everybody needs to be a programmer. Obviously not. I think in a diverse world, you will still need people with different competencies, different capabilities, and they will all contribute differently as a part of a team. So certainly anyone with a background in humanities and social sciences is of vital importance. In fact, one could argue even more so, because in a new world where you have robots and you have machines, and the one thing that robots will never be able to do is to replicate human skills and the ability for us to think and have that human contact. So understanding humans, understanding the humanities and social sciences becomes that much more important. And it's not about soft skills, it's about a deep understanding. Everybody has soft skills, but going deep into the humanities, appreciating history, appreciating the context that we are operating and the social sciences, I think that's a very important expertise.
Yes. Yes.
Coming from somebody who is a social scientist and an economist.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Minister. Prof. Kong is a geography.
Yes, I'm a geographer.
Yes, she's trained in geography. I mean,
Yes.
I think that my own sense is that, for example, in AI now, the big issues and what tech companies lack is people who can think about the right ways of using AI, right? The ethics and therefore the regulation.
Ethical issues. Yes.
And yes. Well, there was a question on vocational education. Sandra, do you want to have a go at that? I mean, it was from someone who said that there still seems to be a stigma attached to vocational education, and I thought that actually that's been changing over the years. What's your sense?
Well, I think traditionally there has been some stigma attached to vocational education, but I do think that's changing though. And I think as employers move to hire people based on skills rather than qualifications, vocational education will become important because there's a very strong focus on skills as opposed to theories and more practical application. But that's something that will take time, I think, because we don't have the German Swiss systems. They've always made vocational and technical education a lot more important.
Well, the pandemic has changed people's view on the people we are calling essential workers, but I guess most importantly, our appreciation for nurses and people who work in the healthcare sector.
Frontline,
now even people who work, I mean, we have realized that there are so many people involved in keeping society going, right? The people who stock the shelves at grocery stores, etc. Yeah. So, well, I'm not getting new questions from the audience. So maybe we can go back to some questions that we had received from members of the public. One of which, actually, we received quite a few questions on mental health and mental wellness. And the sense was that, okay, if more things are moving online, there's a risk that there's less social interaction, students lose peer support. What are your thoughts on, what universities or other people can do in the area of mental health? Yeah, Prof. Kong.
I think that's a really important question, and it is true that working from home, studying from home is a very different proposition. You don't have your friends who are in direct contact, you can't confide in the same way and so forth, and so we are very mindful. There have been various sorts of programs that we've had for a long while, and then some new things that we've introduced. So for example, we have a peer helpers program that's been in place for quite a while, and they've stepped up. They've tried to make sure that they reach out, including to students who are serving SHN, for example, right? To make sure that every day somebody's calling, somebody's checking in on others and so forth. We've put out more material online, videos, podcasts, etc., so that if you need access to resources, that's there. We've had our provost hold online web chats with students. And we were very gratified because a few weeks ago we received an award from the Silver Ribbon Mental Health Award, which recognizes schools, and in this case a university, for having paid a lot of attention to the mental well-being of our students. So it's a journey that we continue on. Every student who is unwell is one student too many.
There's a lot of effort also beyond the university sector because this is really an important priority area. So for the Ministry of Education across all our schools, we are equipping our teachers better to be able to deal with issues of mental health. We are also setting up peer support networks amongst the students so that they can support one another. And we are supporting all our schools with more counselors in order to help deal with anyone who may be experiencing such issues. I think across the board, if you look at not just in Singapore, but many other countries where they survey young people, the general sense is that a young person who is actively involved in student life, participating in activities, CCAs, got a good circle of friends, spends less time on social media, these are the ones who do better with regard to mental wellness.
Yes.
Right, so I think, this is not in Singapore, we're talking about surveys around the world. So I think those are important considerations for us as we think about how we can do better. We are also beefing up our curriculum on citizenship and character education. So from an early age, we want young people, students to understand the issues around mental well-being and cyber wellness, so that they will be growing up with more abilities to navigate this area.
Okay, thank you. And let's move on to a question from someone who's, I think, quite serious about lifelong learning, Andy Yeo. He wants to know, how can full-time working adults make use of university education to study part-time during the weeknights or weekends, since many universities offer working adult courses during weekdays only? Can there be more self-paced courses or micro-learning opportunities? Prof. Kong, could you?
Yes, happy to speak to that. So indeed, we do have these opportunities. So I'm not sure if this gentleman already has a degree and is looking to upskill further. But if you were looking at a master's program, we do run many of our master's programs part-time. Courses are run in the evenings, on weekends even. If you're not looking for a full degree, many of our academy courses, which are the skills upgrading courses, are in fact done in a blended way. So some of it you can do online and then you come in for other parts of it. Our executive training, we just ran a masterclass with 1,000 people attending online. And can be replayed, and you can, attend in your own time, so to speak. So these sorts of flexible ways of delivery, we've stepped up on them and will continue to step up on them. So we've also made it possible for certain programs to be stacked up towards a degree, a master's degree in this case. We're very happy if you'd like to reach out to us to give you some detail.
Minister, do you have any comments?
Well, I think that's, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, when I look at all the universities, the offerings that they now have for executive and lifelong learning, so much more than even 5 years ago. But even so, we are still early in this process. We are still fairly early. It started with Skills Future coming under the Ministry of Education, where we took ownership of that portfolio. So it's very clear that MOE is not only in charge of pre-employment training, but even lifelong continuing education and training. And I think that sent the right signal across all our institutions, and the universities have all been moving very quickly on this in this new space. So we have a lot already today. I just clicking on all the universities' websites last night, on the executive and lifelong learning offerings, so much more than what I remember. So a lot more, and it's like I said, just started, and we want to do even more in this new area, in this space.
I think, I do empathize with Andy because, the reality is that it is difficult to work and study at the same time. So I did a diploma at Republic Polytechnic in career counselling, and the first semester was terrible because it was 3 weeknights a week going to Woodlands. But if you persevere, it gets better. I know, because it tailed off to like twice a week and then once a week. By the time we got to once a week, it's like, whoa, So
so I think with feedback from working adults, I think we can continue to fine-tune and see how formats can be better.
Yes, thank you. Well, okay, we've actually got 1 minute left. So thank you for everything you've shared. Maybe I just ask you to just deliver your parting shot to our audience before we say goodbye. Yeah. Do you have any parting shots, parting words, Sandra?
Well, you know, I do think that the pandemic has forced many changes, and in education, including universities, of course. But as I said earlier, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
And I think university education will only get better and more accessible, I hope, post-pandemic.
Minister?
Well, I think there are many students online, so I would say to all of you, if you're aspiring towards a university education, we are creating more places, more opportunities for all of you to get to university, perhaps right after your JC or Polytechnic, or if not, later on in life. And if you are in university, we will do our very best, MOE, all the university leadership and faculty, to improve and make it as good an experience for you as possible. But you also have to do your part. Make full use of the opportunities you have in university. Find a subject that you like, that you are passionate about, go deep in that area, but also be prepared to push yourself out of the comfort zone. Right? If you are strong in mathematics, then try some humanities subjects for a change. If you are a humanities student, don't be afraid to do a little bit of digital literacy. If you are an introvert, brace yourself and do a communications course and present. Right? So because this is the best time for you to learn and to grow and develop. And I think if we all have that mindset, we can truly be a nation of lifelong learners.
Thank you, Minister.
I would just follow up on what the Minister has said, that getting an education, coming to a university is not just about getting a degree. It's about what you learn. And what we do as educators is to try and provide a multifaceted experience from which you can learn, whether it's learning from the classroom, learning from your peers, from your professors, from industry, from other overseas partners. We're here to provide the opportunities. Avail yourself of the opportunities, and don't lament the fact that we're in COVID and your learning experience is different. You will learn different sorts of things. You will hopefully learn to be more resilient. And I think that for every moment that we are confronted with in life, we learn something from it. So to you who are coming to university soon or hoping to come to university soon, I hope you make the best use of the learning opportunities. We're here for you.
Thank you all of you. I need to ask our audience for one more thing, which is please, we would really appreciate your feedback. So please, use the URL or the QR code on your screens and use that to submit your feedback so that we can know how we can do this better next time. It just remains for me to thank our three panelists, Minister, Prof. Kong and Sandra, for sharing your thoughts today. And thank you all of you for joining us. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Minister.